What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake. Today I'm reading chapters 3 and 4 of Tomorrow, a Xenocide's fanfic by Bekka911 on Wattpad. If you'd like to support the fic or the author themselves, go ahead and check out the first links in the description below. You could also check out my Google form link so that you could recommend Wattpad Read Alouds for the future. All the rules are on the Google form. Just to let you know, it does not need to be Xenocides or from Wattpad. It could be from any fanfiction site. With that being said, here is Chapter 3. It was now determined that Virgil could not cook, and while Patton appreciated the sentiment, he didn't appreciate the burnt pancakes, scorched walls, and horrid smell. Clearly, the anxious side was the source of Thomas's abysmal kitchen skills. Virgil gave him a sheepish smile, rubbing his back of his head. I hope you're hungry. Patton shook his head, unable to suppress his laughter, and waved a hand to clear up the mess. I didn't know it was possible to mess up that bad, he said in amusement. We're not even corporal. Virgil shot him an unimpressed look, complete with a suspicious eyebrow raise. It was overshadowed by the humor on his face. You've been spending too much time with Logan, the anxious trait said accusingly. Patton gasped in mock offense. I never. You've committed treason, Patton, a true act of betrayal. I have no choice but to sentence you to making a proper breakfast, because I need sustenance. Drama queen, Patton muttered, giggling at Virgil's offended mutter. I appreciate the thought, though, Virgil. Thank you. Virgil sat and talked with him while Patton bustled around the kitchen, making some pancakes and mixing together a bowl of fruit, because he knew Logan preferred a healthier breakfast. It was easy, familiar, and Patton's smile grew wider as tension drained out of his body, and every laugh of Virgil's. It took no time at all before everything was ready, and by that time, Roman had appeared and informed them that Logan was on his way, and that Roman was starving and had to be fed at once. I call dibs on the chair next to Patton, Virgil shouted once the food had been set on the table. Roman whirled around and charged for the seat on Patton's other side, but Logan, who had appeared out of nowhere, was already sitting there and sipping his coffee with a challenging eyebrow raised. Come on, Princey whined as he was sentenced to sit in between Logan and Virgil. I wanted to sit next to Patton. You were the first to leave this morning, Patton said lightly. So you're the one who gets to sit opposite of me. Virgil, who was clearly over the talking, simply pointed and said dangerously, food. Patton nodded his consent, and Virgil lunged, sweeping up as many pancakes as he could possibly fit on his plate, before sinking back into his seat with a satisfied, senile grin. Prince followed him, stuffing his plate with a small mountain of pancakes before completely drowning them in chocolate syrup. Logan just started eating his fruit with a content smile. Patton reveled in the warm feeling in his chest as his friends, family, joked and laughed. He ate his own pancakes slowly, simply breathing it all in. The sadness that had been weighing him down trickled away gradually, and it was easier to breathe. You guys are the best, he said suddenly, and Virgil and Roman abruptly stopped their bickering to grin warmly at him. I love you all so much. Surprisingly, it was Logan who responded verbally. We all care greatly for you as well, Patton. Coming from Logan, that meant more to Patton than anything and everything. For the rest of the day, Patton sat in Logan's room with Virgil, talking the day away. After breakfast, Roman had returned to work, promising that he would meet up with them for breakfast. Logan, though, he wasn't under pressure to plan video preparations, as Thomas was still only script writing and so would only rely heavily on Roman for a while, still had work to do, but he allowed himself to engage in Patton and Virgil's conversations, and Patton lived for it. Hey, Logan, he said, sharing a cheeky look with Virgil. What did the Scarecrow win an award? 4.
Please, no.
Being outstanding in his field. Logan's groan was smothered by Virgil's laugh. Patton felt as though his cheeks would split. He was grinning so widely. Hey, Logan, what do you call an elephant that doesn't matter? An irrelevant. Logan hit his head on the desk and sighed. Dear God, why me? Virgil nudged Patton with a wink. I've got one, he said brightly, and Patton beamed. Why did the coffee go to the police? Why? Patton asked eagerly. At the same time, Logan pleaded for peace of mind. It got mugged. Patton laughed hard enough to make his chest hurt, even as Logan tried to give himself a head injury by repeatedly smacking his head on the desk. Virgil sat on the bed, smiling proudly, and for some reason, that just made Patton laugh harder. If you two are quite finished, I must ask you to leave, as I do have work to complete, and you are preventing me from completing it. Patton took deep breaths to quell his giggles and wiped the tears away from his eyes. Don't act like you don't like him, he said, even as Virgil stood up. Lunch is soon, don't forget. Logan quirked an eyebrow. As if I would. Thomas was in an annoyingly good mood for days. Joan didn't have a heart to complain about it. Chapter 4. Thomas wanted to go to the callback. Of course. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did because Patton supported this. His host, as much as he could, but Thomas had betrayed him. Patton had fought for him, had fought to convince everyone that Thomas was a good person, that he truly wanted to be a good friend, and Thomas had always wanted to go to the callback. For the time being, Patton shoves that hurt deep down, and locked it away. Thomas hadn't lied to Patton out of guilt. No way. Patton would deny that until Thomas's dying day. No, Thomas had wanted to be a good person. He'd wanted to. But he hadn't realized how much he'd wanted to go to the callback until the whole court scenario. It sounded right to Patton, and so that is what he'd believe. So he brushed off deceit. He didn't need to be tempted by a snake. He was sure in his interpretation of the whole situation, and he knew that deceit would only try to steer him wrong. Denial truly was a wonderful thing. Logan said, I'm glad to see that the figurative scales of justice have reached equilibrium on this day. Oh, scales of justice. Logan, you're better at this than I am. Patton cheered. It was quite a good pun, if he said so himself. For the love of Archimedes, I will never intentionally make a pun. It made Patton smile, but it wasn't enough to wipe away the twisted mess of emotions that sat on his lungs and made his throat hurt. He was trying so hard not to blame Thomas, even though it wasn't really Thomas who was at fault here. It was Patton. So, for lying to you, Thomas, he said softly. Thomas looked confused, and somehow that just made Patton feel even worse. Lying? What do you mean? When did you lie? Earlier, I kept telling you how you felt even though I didn't know the truth, and I turned out to be wrong. You wanted to go to the callback all along, and I didn't know. Thomas's face was so open and trustful and forgiving, Patton almost felt sick. He wanted to go back to his room now. Well, you thought what you said was true. No, I hoped it was true. I hoped you knew well enough to protect you. Saying something as a fact when you don't have the facts straight is dishonest. He wasn't like deceit, was he? Well, it's okay. I know you were just trying to make sure I did the right thing. But Doing right by Thomas in this specific situation was almost impossible. It was morally right to go to the wedding, but Thomas so desperately longed to go to the callback that it was almost immoral to prevent him. Everyone but Patton was set on going to the callback. What sort of thing did that say about him? Was he so afraid of doing the wrong thing? I really believe you're doing the right thing here. I really hope I'm doing the right thing here. I think I am too. I just wish that what felt right didn't also hurt me. Oh, kiddo, I do too. Patton mustered a gentle smile, even as he felt his chest cave slightly. Well, here's the thing, kiddo. People hurt all the time. Thomas looked so miserable at that, so heartbroken. Patton took a breath, steeled his nerves. Time to be the bigger person. By going to the wedding, you're making sure that two of your friends aren't hurt by the absence of someone they really care about. Do you know why you're doing that? Because it's right? Thomas guessed. Because you can't help but imagine putting yourself in other people's shoes. Something sour was trying to crawl its way up his throat. Patton swallowed it back with a bright smile. What if their shoes are stinky? Well, out of all the shoes to put yourself in, those are the most important. That tendency is a beautiful part of you. Sweet Thomas, you're too loving. You shouldn't give it up for anything. And who knows, maybe one day you'll get married to the second most handsome prince in the world. And I'll bet Lee and Mary Lee will remember when you were there for them. And they'll be there for you. After that, it was a matter of keeping composure until he'd sunk out and was safely in his room. Unfortunately, he had loving and concerned friends. Pat? Virgil said quietly, a hand reaching for Morality's shoulder. Patton couldn't stop himself from drawing back a step, out of Virgil's reach. I know this whole situation sucked for you. Patton just offered him. Thomas is doing the right thing. Virgil's mouth turned down into a small frown. The right thing, if done for the wrong reasons, can be the wrong thing. Patton laughed bitterly, because of course Virgil could use a Disney quote in a situation like this. Pirates of the Caribbean wasn't what I expected you to go for. He kept his tone deceptively light, even as it dipped and waved slightly. But good timing. Virgil didn't say anything, and didn't reach for him again as Patton walked to his room, closed the door, and just stood in silence for as long as it took him not to cry. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to hear more like this, there's a playlist of all of my Wattpad Read Alouds in which you could pull from and find fics you like and do a little read. I'll be posting the next 2 chapters next week, so stay tuned. All my social media links are in the description below if you'd like to support me or follow me on any of those, including my Etsy shop where I make a ton of beaded things, and I am super happy with the things I make, and I love it so much, and I go, oh, whoop, 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 you know? Oh, I love this book so much. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and much like Patton, trying not to cry before he sinks out, remember to do your best.